Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm working on a movie theater because I wanted to talk about my time working in one. So I thought there's no better way to do that than ramble about it while I build one. Now, this one doesn't look like any that I have worked in. It has elements of like one of them, but trying to recreate a copy of one of them would be like a massive undertaking, and this game just doesn't have the mechanics or the objects for it without me downloading like custom content. So this kind of took a lot of creative liberty. Um, but without further ado, let's get into it. But before I start, I just want to say that I did like parts of my job, and though I did uh, grow like to strongly dislike it toward the end of my time, I had never met a more friendly and like weird group of people. A lot of them have definitely impacted my life more than they know, whether it was for the good or the bad. But yeah, just wanted to say that I may talk about things I hated, but I did like it once upon a time. When I first started out, it seemed like such a magical place. Movie theaters have always been a magical place to me. The feeling of going into like the dimly lit room with a bunch of strangers and experience a movie on such a large scale, there's nothing like it. So when it was time for me to get a job, because I was taking a gap year in college, I applied to work at one. I did apply to a grocery store, a toy store, and a bookstore. Um, Two of them I got rejected from, and one of them I actually got put on a wait list. And for some reason, their wait list was like a year long, which was very odd. But I obviously didn't get that one either. So I applied to this movie theater and I went in and I got the job immediately on the spot, which, no offense to the company, but they seem kind of desperate for workers giving me the job on the spot, which I know is a big red flag if a company hires you on the spot. But I was excited to have a job working somewhere, and mostly because it got my dad off my back about sitting at home and not doing anything. Now, my first day out of training was probably one of the most stressful and anxiety inducing things in the world. I didn't have a bunch of people standing around me, didn't have somebody holding my hand, if you will, guiding me through the process. I was basically doing it on my own. Um, I had my first angry guest encounter. She claimed that I rolled my eyes at her and then demanded to see a manager, and in that moment, I thought I was going to get fired. um, I cried about it in the back of the concession stand. I did have some employees looking at me funny, but it was my first job, and getting yelled at is a horrible experience for anybody. Later on, though, I would learn to brush it off because you learn that they are just angry people who don't know how to act in public. My first weekend, unfortunately, also happened to be the opening weekend of The Rise of Skywalker from the new Star Wars trilogy. And that, quite honestly, was the worst time to get that job. I was thrown into concessions my first weekend officially out of training, and it was a disaster. Like, the floor was covered in popcorn, like you could not see the tiles on the floor. Every register was full. There were people in the tiny little stand running back and forth. It was incredibly loud and so overwhelming because I didn't know what to do. They kind of just threw me back there. Nobody really had time to stop and tell me what to do or where I should be, so I was just kind of standing there for a few seconds. Also, the building was had been open at that point for 24 hours straight because the company decided that when Star Wars came out, they were going to be open from Thursday night all the way to Sunday night without closing, which put so much like physical, mental, and emotional strain on the employees. It was crazy. Luckily, that first weekend for me, since I was a new employee and I was only part-time, I didn't have to work any of those shifts. I did worked the next few Star Wars films doing that because they decided that for this entire trilogy, and I also think for Rogue One, we were open that same schedule. We didn't officially close the building until Sunday night. Um, those days, though, were probably some of the most fun I had ever had, especially when you're standing in the concession stand at 3 a.m. No one has walked in for a while, and you and your friends are slap happy as hell, laughing because there is a dented cup on the counter. Like, genuinely looking back, it was not funny, but at the time, it was just hilarious. And those are probably the moments that I personally choose to remember about my time there. They're the ones where you're just having fun. And when you walk into a building, you want to see the employees having fun. You want to see them laughing and talking to each other. It means that they at least have a semblance of liking what they do. And it's just something that after walking away from this job, it's something I'm going to remember. And I'm not really going to remember the one where the lady was yelling at me because I forgot to charge her for a hot dog. Now, I will say that yes, we do in fact talk about rude and mean guests the second they walk away, because we are getting paid dirt. And you're going to come in and tell me how to do my job? Honey, I'd like to see you come back here and run the popper and make sure we don't run out. It's literally not that simple. And no, we do not have fresh popcorn in the back. God, that was so infuriating. During a rush, and we were constantly pre-filling buckets that were getting taken off the warmer faster than they could be filled, and you would have some old lady telling you to get her fresh popcorn. Like, ma'am, it is fresh. Or the people who demanded an unsalted batch during the busiest times. Now that I kind of understand. Like, you have sodium issues, you can't, like, you really want to eat popcorn but you can't have the salt. I get it. We'll make you one, but it was so anger inducing when you would see the person who asked for an unsalted batch and then would immediately ask you for salt afterwards, and then they would dump their salt cup all over the popcorn. Like, what was even the point of asking for unsalted if you're just gonna dump heaps of salt on top of it? Like, I just don't get it. Also, the people who cut in line to get a refill, I would literally be in the middle of helping someone, and then some guy would shove his bucket in my view asking for a refill. Like, excuse me, I'm taking an order here. You can wait. The most annoying thing, honestly. Now, when my building got the self-serve stations, that was such a blessing, but it was also a curse at the same time, because then people would just ask you to get the fresh stuff off the top. Like, I was so exhausted. Not to mention when it's getting close to closing time and you're starting to pre-close things and the machine is empty. There's no popcorn in there whatsoever, and you're literally chest deep in the machine sweeping out the crumbs and stuff, and then you get some guest who comes up, sets their empty bucket down and presses the button, and then they look at you and they say no popcorn's coming out. And I'm like, what part of the lights are off and the entire top half of my body in this machine cleaning it out tells you that there's popcorn in here? You just basically learn that guests just don't have eyes and they can't read and can't see, especially when the machine, they had like 2 chutes for popcorn, right? They had 2 chutes for popcorn and 1 chute for butter. There was a lady who went up to the machine, stuck her bucket underneath the butter part, and was just pouring butter into it. And then she would come up to us and be like, there's no popcorn coming out, it's just butter. It's like, ma'am, that's the butter, like, chute. That is where the butter comes out. That is the butter spout. Move your popcorn bucket to the left or the right and the popcorn will come out. She's like, oh, ha ha ha, my bad. So tiring. So tiring. And then I learned, switching buildings, that I had the exact opposite problem. Whereas the one building I worked at, people couldn't read. This building that I went to, they could read just a bit too much. Like, we had these signs that said open, close, next register on them. And if you were standing at a register and you forgot to flip your sign to open, they would flip out. They would freak out because they were like, oh my God, your sign doesn't say open. It says closed. Why are you calling people? It's like, sorry that I forgot to flip my sign over. But then the worst part is when nobody is standing at a register and somebody forgot to flip it to closed because they're done for the day, they're gone. People will stand in front of that register and just stand there. And when you don't go over there for like 10 minutes because the register is closed and not on, they will be like, excuse me, are you going to help me over here? It's like, yes, it says open, but it's supposed to say closed. And we're like, oh, sorry, nobody's at this register. This one's closed. They're like, oh, well, the sign says it's open. And I'm like, I'm sorry that we forgot to flip the sign, but it is closed. They would get so heated. So heated. Like, common sense would tell you to go over to the registers with the lines and not to an empty register where nobody is standing. Like, it's so wild and crazy. And honestly, working box office was pretty much the same as working concessions. I literally had this lady argue with me about a free movie she got invited to and then was upset because I couldn't give her a seat because it was sold out. Like, I physically could not sell her a seat. She was demanding me to show her the seating chart. So I would show her the seating chart and she'd be like, well, I want to sit there. I want to sit in this seat. It says it's open. And I'd be like, ma'am, I cannot physically sell you that seat. I click on it and it says sold out. Like, there's nothing I can do about it. And then she was demanding a refund for her free ticket. And I was like, I can't give you free back. I can't give you free. I cannot refund free. You know what I would like a refund on? My time spent arguing with you about this free ticket. People just don't seem to like understand certain things no matter how many times you explain it to them. But here we are. I will say though, my favorite arguments are the ones with kids trying to get into R-rated movies. The amount of times where they have put their parents on the phone and the parent would be like, well, I give my consent for my 13-year-old to watch this movie. Like, congrats, but I don't. It's a policy that your 13-year-old has to have a parent with them. Like, you can come watch it with him, but he cannot watch it with his friends because they are not old enough. I don't know what's so hard to understand. Like, cool that you're giving your kid consent, but I don't give them consent to watch this R-rated movie. We would literally get fined money if for some odd random reason the people in charge of rating the movies were to come in and ID your kids in an R-rated movie. We would get fined so much money. I mean, I even once had a kid show me his mom's ID to try to get in. Like, okay, your mom's old enough to watch this movie. Where is she? I also once had a guy show me a screenshot of his friend on FaceTime as proof that he had tickets to this movie that he snuck into. He was trying to be haha funny. I personally did not think it was haha funny. And it just made me more angry because they had already been pissing us off before they even snuck into the theater. They were already being obnoxious. They also had their shoes off and like an entire Whataburger meal laid out on all their tables. So like, needless to say, I kicked them out. And I enjoyed it because they were just so annoying. Also, please, please, please pick up after yourselves. Like, I know it's the theater employee's job to clean the theater in between showtimes, but we're literally just supposed to go in there and sweep and wipe things down. We're not supposed to pick up your big trash because you were too lazy to walk it back down the steps. And I think the most insulting thing was looking at people pick up their trash and they would see me at the bottom, whether I was with a big trash can or my little porter and broom, and they would say out loud so I could hear them, oh, it's her job to clean, just leave it. Or they would see me set down their trash and then come up to me and say, thank you so much. That infuriated me. And I would politely smile at them because it's my job to be nice, but my eyes were telling them to just get out. Like, and also giving me a heads up about how you spilt your popcorn on the ground is nice because, like, yeah, it's nice to have a heads up so that way I don't walk up the stairs and curse to the highest heaven when I find the surprise of, like, the spill. But, like, honestly, just kind of tell me about it and walk away. Don't be like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Like, I spilled all my popcorn and I can't clean it up. I'm just so sorry about it. It's like, don't be sorry. Or if you are sorry, don't try to tell me that you can't clean it up. Just tell me you're sorry, tell me where it is, and then just leave. That's enough. But personally, for me, I find it really satisfying cleaning up popcorn spills. I don't know why. It was just nice getting it to fit all in my porter in one go. Like, I would try to shove so much trash in my porter so that way I wouldn't have to stop, because I tried to clean those cedars fast because the anxiety of being in there and having it roped off and knowing that there's just people standing outside waiting, and if you're standing at the bottom waiting for somebody and everybody's just kind of like staring in looking at you, it's so stressful. The one thing that I will say though is that I think the most annoying thing is when people see that the theater is roped off and it's being clean, and then they still come in anyways. They like go under the rope and they're like, oh, haha, didn't know you were cleaning in here. And it's like, did you not see the big yellow tape that said cleaning in progress? Also, there was one time where this couple came into the auditorium before their movie was supposed to start. The other movie was still going. They sat down, like the credits were going. The couple that was sitting there before had already gotten up and left, so they sat in those seats, and then they sat there, and then I didn't realize it because I had literally just walked in. So I was standing there, the credits were over, and they hadn't gotten up, and I was like, this is really weird. So I'm like, excuse me, are you here for the next one? They're like, oh yeah, we showed up like really early. And I was like, okay, well, I kind of have to clean, so I'm gonna need you guys to step out for a second. They're like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, well, I guess. So then they collected all their stuff and left, and then I walk up there, they're sitting in the two most like dirty seats in the entire auditorium. I'm like, so you just thought it was okay to sit in these dirty ass chairs? Like, yikes. And then there would be those people that would ask if they could watch the first 30 minutes of the movie that they intended to watch but arrived late to. And when it's sold, like, obviously the answer is no, unfortunately, because they don't have a ticket for that showtime. They had a ticket for the previous showtime. And then they'd be like, oh, well, we'll just sit in there for like 30 minutes and then, we'll leave. I'm sorry, but you can't do that either, especially if the movie is like sold out. Where are you going to sit? Like, that's not allowed. And then they would argue. Like, why? Why? Oh, there was this one time where these girls somehow, do not know how, they got past our box office and they got past our ticket drop and got into the theater, and our general manager at the time knew what the problem was because they didn't have like proper ID and stuff to come in and watch this movie. They tried to use their birth certificate as a form of age identification, which, why do you have your birth certificate on you? I have never heard of anybody being like, oh, let me just pull out my birth certificate real quick, which in hindsight should probably work, but it's not a legal form of identification we can use for your age. So she was arguing for like the longest time about needing to use her birth certificate because she didn't have an ID. Like, honey, no, that's not how that works. There's so much ridiculous stuff you see and witness when you're a movie theater employee. And I think the most condescending thing about the whole job is just that people expect you to clean up after them no matter where you are. Like, we could have like a million trash cans around the entire building and people will still expect you to clean up after them because it's your job. Like, yes, I'm getting paid to sweep. I'm getting paid to pick up trash, but you could be a decent human being and help me out by throwing away your big stuff, by putting your dishes in a nice neat pile, by putting your dishes next to the trash chute so that way it's easier for us to pick them up and take them back to the dish pit in the kitchen. I just don't know what happened. I don't know if it's because I had a movie theater job in Texas, and I should say certain types of people in Texas are just so entitled. And I think it's also because I worked in 3 different theaters down there, and 2 of them were in like the rich entitled people area. Because the one theater that I worked at, like the second one that I worked at, most of the people there were nice. Granted, they were a little dumb and they couldn't read, but most of them were nice and understanding. But a lot of them are just rude. So rude. I just don't get it. I really don't. Oh, and then we had a regular who she would come in and ask for popcorn, and then she would ask us to fill up this box for her refill. And if you weren't like knowledgeable of this fact, she would start yelling at you and getting mad at you because you weren't filling up her little Campbell's soup box full of her refill. I personally only had to deal with her once, and luckily I was told about this beforehand, so I didn't make the newbie mistake of not filling up her box. But bless this employee who saw her, she came in and she was like, I want to buy a popcorn, and then I need you to put the popcorn in this box right here. The employee said, oh, I don't know if we can do that. I turned around when I noticed what was happening, and I immediately went over there and I just took the woman's box and I filled it up and I gave it to her because I was like, I'm not dealing with this. I'm not having this woman yell at us. And then I had to explain to the younger employee who she was, and she was like, oh, that's weird. And I was like, it is weird, but we don't question it. We just do it. It was actually kind of funny, the amount of regulars that come to some of these theaters. There was one couple. This was before I quit the first time, because I did quit this job twice. And the first time I quit, like before I quit, there was this one couple and I had their loyalty phone number memorized. They would come in and see me and we would be like, hey, what's up? Oh, you're watching this movie today? Because they would always come in Thursday nights to watch the new releases. It would be them, and like it would be the 2 parents and their 2 sons, and sometimes the parents would go and watch one new movie, the kids would go and watch another, or the mom and one of the sons would go and the dad and the other son would go to a different one. It was very cute, but I had their loyalty phone number memorized. But I think the saddest part was that I was in a Chick-fil-A getting food on my break, and I saw them in there and they recognized me not at work. And I was like, oh yikes, I really am in deep in this job. I think that was the first time I had ever seen a guest like outside of my workplace and they recognized me. I don't think that ever happened to me outside of that. Which, come to think of it, when I went back to work, this was after the pandemic and after I literally couldn't find another job after graduating college because pandemic. I didn't see them again, which was kind of sad, but you know, everything kind of shut down in 2020. Movie theaters weren't really operating, but I hope they're doing okay. I often think about some of the regulars that I saw and that I didn't see afterwards, and I'm like, I wonder how they're doing. I wonder where they're going now. I will say one of the absolute worst shifts to work is getting the restroom shift. Women are gross. Y'all are so nasty. Like, everybody talks about how, like, ooh, gross, the boys' bathroom is disgusting and it's disgusting and nasty. Women are so much cleaner. No, we are not. No, we are not. Y'all don't flush the toilet. Like, for the love of God, flush the toilet. And when an employee goes into the restroom, no name tag, no porter, no broom, nothing to indicate they are working and they're just trying to go pee. Do not stop them and try to complain about something. Because I guarantee you, they will not deal with it right then and there. There are a million other employees out on the floor that you could talk to about your problem. Let the employees go to the restroom in peace. That was always my fear going into the restroom. I tried my hardest not to go to the restroom at work because I was like, if I go in here and something's wrong, somebody's going to come up to me and complain about it. So I would literally make it a race for myself to see how fast I could go to the restroom because I just didn't want to be stopped. They will deal with your problem after they go to the restroom. If they do not look like they are working, please let them pee in peace. Thank you. Also, this thing that I'm working on right here, I don't know if this is going to be common in a lot of places, but I'm kind of making like a drink station because at all the theaters that I worked at, they had self-serve, like those freestyle Coke machines. Obviously, the game doesn't have those, so I just put like 3 vending machines here, but this is supposed to represent like the drink stations that my jobs had. And these places were always a disaster and a mess. The floor was always sticky, straw wrappers everywhere because nobody could throw their trash away in the trash can. I think that was also another infuriating thing, was the fact that you would walk in there, there would be napkins, lids, straw wrappers cluttering the counters around the trash can and around the trash chute. They would never be in it. They would just be around it. It's like, how? Literally how? And then I think the worst part was when you were in there physically trying to fix things and you had like 20 people coming up to you and complaining about the same problem. It's like, I am trying to work on it. I understand the problem. I only one person. I can only do so much at a time. There was also one movie that came out and we ran out of ice. Like all of our ice machines were broken and not working. That was probably one of the worst weekends, was constantly having people come up to us and tell us that their drinks were warm because we didn't have ice. And there was really nothing we could do because our machines just couldn't make ice fast enough. We didn't have like an extra ice machine because our building was so old. We just didn't have the ice machine anymore because it wasn't working. So we just had to rely on the machines to create their own ice, and they just weren't making ice fast enough because people were just taking it at such a high rate. That was so bad. That was like probably one of the worst days to have a drink station shift. And then earlier in the video, when I was working on the box office guest services area, I put down a clothes basket and a toy box, and that was supposed to represent like the lost and found, because normally our lost and found is just shoved in a cabinet, but I wanted to kind of represent it, so like I put that stuff right there in front of the counter. And let me tell you, we have found some weird things in the theaters, and some of y'all have no shame. Like, we found underwear. Y'all are freaks. What possesses you to just take your underwear off? Like, and I don't mean finding underwear in the restrooms. I mean finding underwear in the auditoriums. Like, what are y'all doing? In fact, I know what y'all are doing, and it's nasty. It's nasty behavior. Like, when the 50 Shades movies came out, I wasn't working when the first one came out, but I did work when the second and third one came out. And when those were coming out, we had like the adult stores and stuff, and like the sexy lingerie stores. They would have watch parties on premiere night. Like on Thursday night, they would have parties, and they would have gift bags with them. Well, one of our old men employees had been in there cleaning. I was out in the lobby area, and he comes up to guest services with his hands cupped, and in his little cupped hands was a tiny purple vibrator. Like, he was just touching it with his bare hands. It was so nasty, but also kind of funny at the same time, because bless him, he didn't know what it was. And so he just picked it up and was carrying it in his hands like it was some precious thing that needed to be protected. Like, it was so nasty. I just feel so bad. I remember my manager rushed him over to the trash can and made him drop it in, and then she dumped so much sanitizer on his hands and then immediately said, "No, I need you to go wash your hands as well," which reminds me the amount of times we've caught people doing it in their theater. Like, why can't y'all just wait till you get home? Genuinely, why can't y'all just wait till you get home? Like, it's not fun for us to catch you with your pants down. I do know that there are some managers out there who love catching people in the act because they think it's funny. I think it's embarrassing. It's especially embarrassing when we have to call your parents and tell them you were being nasty in a children's movie. It was almost always teens in PG movies. I will never forget being told the story about how in the front row a couple was doing it literally in the front row, and there were people watching the movie behind them. Y'all have no shame. It's disgusting. Like, just wait till you get home, guys. Please, just wait till you get home. That is so unsanitary and so nasty. I don't care if you think your theater is going to be empty. I don't care if you think people aren't paying attention to you. They, in fact, are paying attention to you because we get complaints upon complaints about people using their phones, about people talking. Which reminds me, the talking thing, I will never forget this. This is one thing that I will never forget. We had a screening, I believe it was for Moana, and it was a free like Disney screening, first come first serve type thing. I will never forget a fight literally broke out because there was two families sitting. One family was sitting in front, one family was sitting behind. The family sitting in front, their kids only spoke Spanish. So the parents were whispering Spanish translations to their kids about what was going on in the movie. The family behind them kept telling them to shut up and be quiet because, yes, they were talking during the movie, but their kids didn't really understand what was going on. So they were whispering Spanish translations and it was pissing the family behind them off. So once the movie was over, this family turned around and started yelling at the family behind them. And then the family behind them started yelling at them. And then the next thing you know, punches were being thrown, hair was being pulled. We couldn't get them out of the auditorium fast enough. And as they were walking down the ramp to leave, fruit punch just goes flying. And that's when all hell broke loose. More hair pulling, yelling, punches, slamming people against the wall. I vividly remember, because there were little kids there, they had kids with them. I vividly remember this one kid getting slammed into the corner of the wall because their dad got pushed up against them, and I had a panic attack. I started hyperventilating. It was probably like the worst thing I've ever seen at a movie theater, like while working one at least, and that was the first time I ever had like a panic attack. It was so awful. I understand why the families were upset, but like, we don't need to be punching and kicking and throwing drinks. Luckily, nobody was seriously injured, and it makes for a fun story for me to tell later. But I have so many stories about working at my theaters. So many that like I literally can't fit them all into this video. Maybe I'll do this again sometime. My time working at a theater was just wild. So much stuff happened. I met like literally every single guy that I dated was one of my coworkers, which that's a story for some other day. But I haven't uploaded this lot to my gallery. I kind of just built this really to rant about my old job. I built this for fun, which was very therapeutic, getting to talk about some things and getting to rant, because most of the people that I would like to rant to, I've already ranted to, because basically all my friends work at a movie theater. If you made it this far into the video, thank you for listening to me rant. Thank you for watching. Maybe I'll do this again in the future and build like a different type of theater and tell some other stories, because I have some wild guest experiences that I didn't get to talk about. But I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks again for listening and watching. Bye.